Hi, my name is Ali Watts and I work with ISAAP in Communications and Engagement. Welcome to this Blue Room interview, kindly hosted by Richard Majewski of the ESSA Consultancy. Today, we're going to be putting a series of questions to Steve Martin, Director of ISAAP, and the driving force behind the mission to make the service department sector better, safer, and ultimately more selectable. Steve will be explaining what ISAAP is and why accreditation is so important to all service department providers in this highly competitive and rapidly expanding market. The interview will be conducted by Claire Bryson, Global Director of Key Accounts at edyn. She'll be asking Steve to outline what the main accreditation schemes are and how each one works. The interview will explain how each scheme benefits the provider, enables them to become more visible and ultimately more selectable to corporate clients by demonstrating that they've been externally, independently, and impartially verified by ISAAP. Within the interview, Claire and Steve are going to discuss the core values of ISAAP accreditation, which Steve has outlined in his mission statement. This statement defines ISAAP's beliefs that all providers should be enabled to demonstrate that their properties are safe and secure, and that this accreditation scheme is the one scheme that does this practically, cooperatively, and rigorously. So welcome again to this interview. I'm delighted to introduce Claire Bryson from edyn. Hi Claire, and over to you.
Thanks, Ali. edyn has been accredited by ISAAP for nearly 8 years, and we see this as a valuable tool demonstrating to our corporate clients that the prescribed standards of security and safety are in place across all of our properties. So the first question I have for you, Steve, is your recent LinkedIn article is entitled The ISAAP Mission. Can you summarise what that is and why it's important to the industry sector?
Hi, Claire. Yeah, thanks for that. So I thought, as you'd indicated, we've been doing this for a good number of years now. In fact, some providers have been accredited by ISAAP for nearly 11 years. So we have been around a while. And I figured it was as good a time as any to put together something which really verifies what it is that we do, why we do it, and what the benefits of us doing it are. And in essence, I came up with a one-liner which really does encapsulate what we do, which is helping to make serviced accommodation better and safer for everyone. So how do we do that? Well, we work with the providers and agents through shared objectives of maximizing the guest experience by delivering accommodation excellence. By working with ISAAP, the accommodation providers can better demonstrate their quality and safety credentials to prospective clients, and so they can enhance their chances of gaining additional business revenue. By achieving an ISAAP accreditation or certification, the provider can display the logos or badges which underwrite their achievement and elevate them above their competitors, as well as creating more opportunity for themselves. Accredited providers are helping to further professionalize the industry sector, and that's really important, creating a better environment in which to compete with hotels. So that's the mission, and those are the reasons why it's important to the industry sector.
So what are the core schemes that ISAAP offer then, and how do they differ from each other?
So we have 6 schemes in all. We have a couple that we deliver through working with some expert partners. So we work with GSA Global to deliver our security accreditation. We work with a company called Sanderson Phillips to deliver our sustainability accreditation, as well as the ISAAP approved agent accreditation, obviously working with agents. The 3 core schemes that we operate as a specialism really are compliance accreditation, quality and comfort certification, and building accreditation. Those are the 3 that really have the greatest degree of engagement through our provider clients. So those are our three core schemes.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the compliance accreditation? How does it work? What does it say about the accommodation providers who achieve it?
Okay, so compliance accreditation, and it sounds quite scary, and I apologize for that, I guess, but it really is a remote verification of safety and security standards operated by a provider of serviced accommodation across their inventory. It's an award which is attributed to the company, not specifically to a property. I mentioned it's remote, so you don't get an ISAAP assessor visiting any of the sites operated by that provider of accommodation. It's all done remotely, and it's essentially an exchange of verification documentation, evidential documentation, I should say, for elements of health, safety, and security. So including things like fire risk management, utility safety, equipment safety, insurances, and things like that. So the provider answers a set of questions, and then the assessor will determine what documents they will need to see in order to verify the standards. And eventually you get through to the pointy end, which is ISAAP saying, yes, thank you very much. You've achieved the necessary standards, at which point we award the confirmation of accreditation with the logo, which is valid for a year. And the provider, on achieving ISAAP compliance accreditation, can signal to any of its customers, their clients, that it has been independently, externally, and impartially verified by ISAAP as having the required standards of safety and security in place across its portfolio of properties. And that's important because ISAAP's compliance accreditation is aligned with the requirements of ISO 31030, which is the industry travel risk management standard. And so therefore that's important to corporate clients.
And then you mentioned the quality and comfort certification. How does that process work, and what types of providers would you want to achieve this certification?
That's right. Well, this one differs from the compliance accreditation I've just spoken about, mainly from the perspective of it does require an ISAAP assessor to conduct a site visit. And this deals with the product, really. It's the product that the provider is selling. It's accommodation. So compliance deals with the health and safety and security elements of that accommodation, but this is about the internal quality aspects, how the guest is impacted by experiencing staying with that provider for however long they're staying. Excuse me. I just need to take a little bit of water. I think that's okay. So typically what will happen is that, and just to emphasize, this is not a mystery guest process. This is totally above board in as much as the provider knows and agrees with ISAAP when the overnight assessment will take place. So an apartment is allocated. The assessor will arrive and go through the complete guest experience from arrival, booking really, arrival, check-in, the overnight stay, and the departure process, and everything that happens in between that. Everything that the assessor tests is scored out of 5, and the outcome is that there's an overall score out of 5 that's awarded at this point only to that one apartment. Well, of course, that isn't enough to award certification having just seen one apartment. So how this works is that the next day, the assessor will need to see a proportion of that provider's inventory to carry out comparison viewings. Each viewing takes probably 10 minutes maximum. It can be shorter, plus traveling time, of course, if you're running around a city trying to go to all the different properties. So it normally takes up most of a day. And what will happen is, as the assessor views each additional apartment, they will very simply be plussing or minusing against the overnight assessment experience. So that's the base assessment. So there'll be ups and downs, pluses and minuses. It all goes into a calculation, and the outcome will be an adjustment to the overnight assessment score, whether it be up or down, depending on the different apartment units that have been viewed by the assessor, so that the overall outcome actually reflects a better sample size of that provider's inventory, and the score is therefore more meaningful. And over a number of years, of course, we get to see a higher proportion of that provider's inventory in that location, whether it be per country or per city. And so year on year, the score better indicates accuracy of what that provider actually does and how they benchmark against competition. So similar to compliance accreditation, the award is an annual award. The provider receives a badge with the score out of 5 on it. Similarly, also to compliance in terms of ISO 31030, because this certification is focusing on how the guest will live. So in the case of corporates, how the employee will live. It focuses on the well-being element, which is really key to a consideration that corporates need to make when selecting their travel plans for their employees. So elements such as space, privacy, furnishings, equipment, working from home ability, the location, the environment, the local environment, all of these things go into making sure that the well-being of the guest, the employee, is looked after during that process. So that's the relevance of quality and comfort certification.
Thank you. And finally, you mentioned the building accreditation. Where does that sit in relation to your other 2 core schemes?
Okay, yeah. So when I'm asked that question, my immediate response is it's the pinnacle award that we offer. And the reason I say that is because it has limited eligibility, and the entry-level score is higher, for example, in the quality and comfort element of it than the regular quality and comfort certification. So it's a stretch target. And let me explain a little bit more detail. So it contains the elements of compliance accreditation, the quality and comfort certification, plus an additional section which relates to the building or the property itself, its grounds, its branding, its lighting, its public areas, its staff interactions, and many things associated with those types of things. So 3 distinct areas. So the compliance I've already explained already, and the add-on here is that the assessor, when carrying out the quality and comfort element of building accreditation, will also verify on site physically some of the compliance accreditation elements too. So it's an enhanced compliance accreditation check. It's an enhanced quality and comfort standard that the provider needs to achieve, plus the added addition of the building elements as well. So that's what building accreditation is. So it does require an overnight assessment, and it does require the following day additional viewings, which for a building will take place in that same address. But the output is a verification that these are the standards that the assessor found at this address, at this property, which for corporates is important because they know exactly where they're going to send their employees, and they want to know everything about that location. So whereas quality and comfort certification on its own and compliance accreditation on its own are really reflections of the provider's competencies across its inventory, this one is all about how that provider operates at this particular location, which is why I feel that it is our pinnacle award. Again, all of the requirements aligned with those of ISO 31030 are in place, and this should appeal therefore to corporates when they make their selections of properties.
Okay, so how does ISAAP incorporate different countries' regulations and standards within the schemes that you've just then mentioned?
That's a difficult one. It's not easy, but we do it, and we've done it for a number of years now. Took a while to work out how we would do that. We have our ISAAP global standard, and I can confidently say that we apply the same standards in any country in which we carry out assessment activity. Our global standard is based on the UK and European laws, of course, because that's where we are. But in any country we work within, we apply the essence of the global standard, so that if a country doesn't do certain things or doesn't require of its providers to achieve certain standards in certain areas, then we will make sure that there's a way that they can introduce such standards before we can award the accreditation. So what we're not doing is saying that there are easy countries and difficult countries in which to operate. The global standard should be something on which corporates, anyone in the industry looking at, can rely upon. If they see an ISAAP logo in any country, they will know that the same processes have been followed. Not necessarily the same processes, but the same intentions will have needed to have been verified. So a great example of that is fire risk assessments. So of course, these are famous in the UK. We will have to have a fire risk assessment, and it's a complex document which assesses the safety of a property in relation to fire risks. Now, in many countries, they don't have such thing as a fire risk assessment. Many countries operate where the local fire department will come in once a year and do a full inspection of the premises. But when they're doing that, they are actually assessing the same elements. It's just called something different. So even though a provider might answer the question, do you have a fire risk assessment in place, as a no, doesn't mean to say they can't still verify that the standards of safety from a fire risk perspective aren't in place in that building. They can still demonstrate it through other means. So that's how we apply the different regulations across different countries. Where a country, sorry, not a country, but where a provider in a different country is deemed to be operating below our global standard, we will allow time for them to develop an action plan to close the gaps. We will work with them to help them do that. It's not in our interest for them to fail. It's with all of this, it's in our interest to help people to succeed. So that's what we do. There are differences in language, phraseology, approaches to questions. These are all banana skins that we encounter going through this process in other countries, but we do it. And also, the legal requirements is a very important consideration, because different countries have different legalities. Even in this country, legal requirements change in terms of accommodation operations quite routinely. So I and my team make it our responsibility to make sure that we're always ahead of the curve in terms of what's the new standard, this country, other countries, so that we make sure that we're going to remain relevant with our schemes. So there are 2 reviews every year of the compliance criteria, so where we will update in accordance with local or international laws on safety and security. And similarly, twice a year, we moderate the assessors' work so that no matter where they are in the world, they will be able to deliver the same outcome no matter which assessor it is what I'm trying to say, they would come back with the same outcome, because they need to work consistently. So these are the things that we do in support of maintaining our global ISAAP global standard.
Thank you, Steve, for that detailed explanation. So moving on then, would you say that the ISAAP accreditation is still as relevant now as it was perhaps during COVID times?
Okay, that's an interesting one. This is a quick answer. You'll be pleased to know. ISAAP was doing its stuff well in advance of COVID coming to visit us. When COVID visited us, we decided pretty quickly we needed to add in a module into the compliance accreditation scheme, which dealt with the needs for providers to deliver and maintain hygienic properties and procedures. When COVID sort of left us, although it hasn't really left us, but the impact of COVID and how we as a country and as different countries have addressed it is now more managed and calmer, then we decided that it was the right moment to withdraw the COVID module from the compliance accreditation. But in the event that a different pandemic rears its head, something of a similar nature that has such an impact on business, on accommodation, we will be ready, as we've proven, to implement the necessary additional modules so that providers can continue to demonstrate to their clients that they are acting with safety and security in mind for their guests.
Okay, so just moving on then to other potential hotel-like accreditation bodies, which I won't mention any names, but why would you say that ISAAP would be a better choice than some of the other options out there?
I wouldn't. It's not while I'm being recorded anyway. But what I would say is that I think it's about relevancy. I think ISAAP, we have a USP in that we are the specialist provider of serviced accommodation and corporate housing certification and accreditations. That's a bit of a mouthful, and it's like I'm reading it. I wasn't, honestly, because I know that bit. But we don't operate in any other sector of the hospitality industry. We don't, I nearly said mess with, because that's what I normally say. But on this occasion, I'm not going to say mess with. We don't work with guest houses, bed and breakfasts, hotels, caravan sites, yurts, boats, whatever it is. We don't do all of that stuff. We are fully focused on service accommodation, corporate housing sector. So we think if it's about being better, I would say no, it's about being relevant. So for this sector and for this sector only, it should be ISAAP because that's what we stand for.
Great, thank you. In one of my earlier questions, you referenced ISO 31030. What actually is that, and how does it impact on service accommodation and corporate housing providers? And does it actually help corporate clients or individual guests?
Blimey, how many questions was that? Okay, let's see. This is a big subject, but I'm going to do a bite-sized answer. ISO 31030 is the travel risk management standard. It was introduced in September 2021. It means that corporate clients, to you as a provider of serviced accommodation, will behave differently because they are going to have to demonstrate due diligence in their activities when selecting accommodation. And accommodation is just one of the elements that's involved in the standard, but let's just focus on that because that's what we're interested in. So they have to demonstrate that they've gone through a due diligence process in making the selection of accommodation provider, and that they've carried out continual duty of care for their employees, that their traveling assets. So how do they do that? Well, they are best advised to look for providers who can demonstrate that they have gone through an external, independent and impartial verification process, such as those offered by ISAAP. This is because, and now how that spins onto the providers is that if you know that the corporates have to behave in that way and have to demonstrate that they are following those standards as required by the ISO, then providers should recognize that they need to be selectable by the corporates. In other words, to be standing up and saying, hello, you can pick us because we've got all this stuff that we've done independently, externally, impartially, and we've got this accreditation. So that's what ISO 31030 does in our sphere of interest in the serviced accommodation section. So it'll change the way things work. As I said, just to reiterate, corporates will act differently. So providers need to be ready to make themselves selectable, to give them the chance of getting that additional business or even retaining their existing business, because corporates will be looking at different things. And does it help? I think you said, does it make accommodation better? I think you also asked me, how does that impact on guests? Well, yes, what should I say? It impacts on guests positively, because both corporates and providers are working together to make sure that the accommodation is of the right quality, it's of the right safety and security to meet the standards which ISO 31030 requires. And as an aside, I can tell you that the ISAAP accreditations and certifications are all aligned with the requirements of ISO 31030. So hopefully I've explained it, but hit me with another angle if I haven't.
No, that was great. Thank you. A long answer, but definitely provided some more clarity. So moving on to our final few questions. What recognition does an ISAAP accredited or certified accommodation provider actually benefit from? And how can us as providers best promote our ISAAP achievements?
Okay, great. That's a really good question, because over the years I've been so frustrated that some providers, they pay the money, they go through the process, they achieve it, and then they do nothing. They do nothing to promote the pain of what they've just gone through. So it's a good question. So let me explain what we do firstly to promote the achievement. So we do a LinkedIn post to recognize and announce that a provider has been successful in whatever scheme that they've completed. We advise the relevant trade bodies where we work closely, such as the CHPA in North America or ASAP in the UK and Europe. We advise the agents we work with so that they can promote those providers on their platforms as having gone through the ISAAP and achieved the ISAAP standard. On our website, we have a page which shows all of the various awards that are current. So that's a snapshot of who has what and what the scores are. So that's a good promotional tool. We provide logos and badges to the successful companies so that they can add them to their own websites. They can use them on their marketing materials. And we work with those providers who've achieved an ISAAP award to help them to write meaningful content on their websites so as to tell people what it is that we've just achieved, why it's important to you as our customer, why it's important to you as one of our supplier partners in agents' cases. And we can then link that back to the ISAAP website if that's something they want to do, to show how the whole circle of life works in this area. So that's what we do. Can you just repeat the second part of the question, please, Claire? I've lost it.
Yes, It was how can us as providers best promote the ISAAP achievement?
That's it. Okay, yes. Oh, that's it. This was the bit that frustrated me because nothing was being done in some cases. So, of course, you could get active on LinkedIn and you could tell everyone that you've done this. And then, of course, we would spin off that and say wonderful things about you. You can display logos on your website and your marketing materials, as I mentioned in the previous bit. I think those two merged in together. You can link back to the ISAAP website to show the relevance, the context of what you've done. And I'm really sort of going over what I think I went too far on explaining the first part of the question. So it's really the same again. It's about understanding what you've just achieved, thinking about who you need to tell about it, and getting us to help you put the right things together and to be your client-facing assistant, really, in putting the right words and attaching the right levers and buttons to your platform so that it's working for you, having gone through the process. I think that's how I would answer that question, albeit in a very haphazard sort of way, apparently.
So just to expand a little bit further on that, how would you envisage a sales team actually selling an ISAAP accreditation to a corporate client if they were in front of them? What are the things that you think they should be saying?
I think it starts with educating the corporate client. So much as I've just said, it's about telling them what it is that you've got here in terms of this accreditation, what it means to them, in that you are selectable. You've taken the trouble and the expense of going through this process, but at the end of it, when you have become successful, you're standing up as being a company that has the credentials. You've proven your integrity. So you need them to know what that means to them, and that is that they can have their employees stay with confidence in your properties because they know by seeing this badge that you've gone through that process. And so their work is done in terms of their due diligence verification. They need to verify that they've gone through a due diligence process. So they will be able to say, we did that, we selected an accredited provider. So that's really important to the corporates. As I said, we can support any company that wants to talk to its corporates and why it's important that you've got this award. We can work with you to make sure that the right language is used so that stuff needs to resonate with the corporates. 31030 is coming at them from one direction, not the band, the general direction. And this is at the end of that process, the providers are there saying, yep, this closes the loop. We've got this, so you can proceed with us and not worry about the quality and the safety and the security. I think, in a nutshell, quite a large nutshell, that was it.
Thank you. And then finally, just to finish off, how will ISAAP and its 3 core schemes evolve over time?
Very briefly and succinctly, hopefully, to retain our relevance to the industry sector. I talked about the biannual reviews we do for compliance and for quality and comfort certification, and the legal checks that we do to make sure we're ahead of the curve. Those will continue. We'll be continuing to work with BSI, British Standards Institute, and ISO on keeping close to the requirements of ISO 31030, because this is where this industry is going. Knowing that, then providers should rest assured that ISAAP can help them. We can work with you to make sure that you get the right scheme accreditation verification for your business. So yeah, it's relevance. I think relevance is the word. We'll continue to remain relevant. And we probably need to spend a bit of money on getting a portal on our website to make it easier for some of our customers. But I didn't say that, but I know I've got to do that. But I think that's my answer, Claire. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. That was very insightful. I will hand back over to Ali now to conclude the rest of the session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks both for taking the time to explain what ISAAP is, what it does, and why it's so important to the future of the industry. We're all aware of the emerging macro trends driving the service department sector forwards. At the heart of these are health and safety transparency, ESG compliance, and quality and comfort responsibility. So now is the perfect time to engage with accreditation. ISAAP is the industry body that will guide you from the start of the process, educating, assisting, and enabling you to find the program that works best for your company and puts you in the strongest position to face the future. Peace of mind, competitive edge, and increased opportunities await. So take the first step and get in touch. If you'd like more information, you can look at the ISAAP website, of course, or read some of Steve's articles on LinkedIn, or just get in touch with one of us to discuss how ISAAP may be able to help you. Details follow at the bottom of this broadcast. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope to hear from you soon. Goodbye.